Meanwhile, a report by Canada's Environment Commissioner says this country is going to miss its 2030 reduction targets, emissions targets. This as debate over the carbon tax dominated talk inside and outside the halls of Parliament. Is Ottawa doing enough to explain how carbon pricing works to Canadians? I spoke with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change on Friday. Minister Guilbeault, nice to see you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary.
You said this past week to a climate conference, a group, that you believe the government needs to do a better job defending and explaining the carbon tax and making the case for it. Is the carve-out that was given to Atlantic Canada and what has happened since then evidence that you haven't done a good enough job explaining the policy, what the goal is, and what the consequences of it are?
If I may specify, the exemption that was announced 2 weeks ago is for home heating oil across the country.
Sure.
There are, in fact, more people in Quebec that use home heating oil than all of Atlantic Canada put together. So it's not an Atlantic Canada specific measure. Number two, I mean, yes, we need to do a better job. It's a complex piece of policy. There's what is carbon pricing? What does it mean to price pollution? The rebate that people get, they get it in their bank account. They don't see it. They don't necessarily understand that the linkages. So it is a tough and a difficult thing to explain publicly. And I think we need to do a better job of doing it.
So what does that sound like then? If you're trying to sell it to people again at a time when there's a lot of people questioning whether we should have one, particularly when they're faced with issues around affordability?
Well, I mean, the fact remains that right now in Canada, where federal pricing system applies, 8 out of 10 households are better off with it than without it. They get more money back. But I think this piece of this fact has a hard time making it through as people are struggling. The opposition has been effective at making some Canadians believe that the price of everything is going up because of pricing pollution, whereas the Bank of Canada says that it's contributing 0.15% to inflation. So it's having a very modest impact on inflation. And if we were to remove carbon pricing in Canada, most Canadians wouldn't see any difference in terms of affordability, and it would cripple our ability to tackle climate change in Canada.
I do wonder whether you fought against the idea of pausing the carbon tax at all.
I mean, what I've said publicly is in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to do that. We could focus all our energy on fighting climate change, which is, I mean, we saw last summer how tens of thousands of Canadians were displaced. At one point, almost 200,000 Canadians. We still don't have a good understanding of the economic cost, but it's going to be in the billions of dollars to Canadian taxpayers, because everyone is paying for the impacts of climate change. We know those costs of climate change are going up, but we also, we live in a world where people right now, a number of Canadians are challenged with affordability issues, with the rising of inflation rate and interest rate as well. So I think as a government, we have to be able to adapt to changing circumstances while remaining steadfast on the fact that we need carbon pricing to achieve our climate goals. Without it, it has provided about a third of the emission reduction we've seen in Canada since 2019.
Well, And I want to get to your emissions reductions, but let me just butt in there for a moment. So I guess I'm asking, though, whether you, as a lifelong environmentalist, have been able to understand that this is a compromise worth making, or whether you think that this has hurt the government's dedication to carbon pricing as one of its principal values.
Carbon pricing still applies. So home heating oil represents about 1% of our emissions in Canada. We've paused carbon pricing on 1% of our emissions for 3 years. Carbon pricing still applies to 99% of our emissions, roughly, in Canada. It is still a key signature policy for us to be able to achieve our 2030 target. So we are as dedicated as we were. Yes, for very specific reasons, we decided to pause it for one application, but it continues to apply for all large emitters in Canada and for by and large to the rest of the economy.
Let's talk about the 2030 targets, because the Environment Commissioner says you are not currently on track to meeting them, and I think you know that. For instance, the oil and gas caps.
Not only do I know that, but I've said that publicly many times.
Sure.
There's nothing the Commissioner said that I haven't said publicly. Our plan right now gets us to 85% of our 2030 targets. And I'm on record for saying that. And he's saying he agrees with me, I guess.
Yeah, but he's also saying, and has said to you many times, and you agree with him on this case as well, that you're not moving fast enough. The cap on oil and gas emissions, for instance, you're going to do a framework, draft regulations, when you know that if you got that done, it would have a significant impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So why are you not moving faster on some of those other key things?
I would challenge that perception. In the last 2 years, as Minister of Environment, I moved ahead on new regulations for a clean fuel regulation to ensure that refineries reduce the climate impacts of the fuels they sell to Canadians. We're moving ahead on a zero-emission vehicle mandate to ensure that by 2035, 100% of light-duty vehicles sold in Canada will be zero-emission vehicles. We've put forward methane regulations to reduce in the oil and gas sector methane emissions, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, by at least 40% by 2025 and at least 75% by 2030, which is one of the most ambitious targets in the world. We've put forward clean electricity regulations. They're still in a draft format because we're consulting. On top of that, the Minister of Finance has announced $200 billion worth of investment. In the last 2 years, there's never been a time in our history where we've done so many things, but we need to do more. We need to continue because we're not there yet. And I agree with that.
So can you meet the goal then? Do you take issue with what the Commissioner is projecting, and do you actually think that you'll meet the goal?
The Commissioner said that he was worried that the window of opportunity to be able to deploy the necessary measures was closing, but he didn't say the window was closed. And he didn't say we can't. He says we have to accelerate. And I agree with him. We need to do more, and we need to do it faster.
I'll just end on this. The Prime Minister says there'll be no more carve-outs. You have said there'll be no more carve-outs. Do I understand that, though, that if there were to be, that you don't want this job anymore, if that's the road the government's going to go down?
The fact that the Prime Minister himself has said that there would be no more carve-out gives me great confidence that there would be no more carve-out, and I'll be happy to continue serving him as Environment and Climate Change Minister for Canada.
Okay, Minister, we'll leave it there. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.